going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to our January 10th Sunday service post-discussion or post-service discussion. We have with us the Reverend Dennis Reynolds, who gave the talk today about where do we go from here. So thank you, Dennis. It's always a pleasure. I would say you're definitely one of our 3 top favorite regulars. So. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the courtesy laughs. So Laura Lee wanted to go first.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to Dennis. I appreciate, as a relatively new member of the UUU, I really appreciate clarification of the 7 principles. Your talk this morning was very nice. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I talked a little bit when Martha and Michael and I meet in person on Wednesday or Thursday this week to, record it, that's part of it is, the ordained UU clergy and those 3 regulars. That's part of what I feel called to bring. And I'll just give you a little context about that timing too. We recorded this Thursday, and the events at the Capitol were unfolding just the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And in a introduction to me that Martha's used sometimes, she quoted a descriptive phrase from me. I feel like the best sermons come when I sit with a sacred text in one hand and the day's news source in the other. I was, when I sat down to write this, I was thinking more generally. And then Wednesday night included just a little bit about what had happened that day. And I felt like that just sense of how do we go from here is even a more timely question this week than it was when I sat down to write the sermon mostly last week.
Very apropos.
Yeah, thank you for that. So JC, you wanted to go next.
In spite of what you may have received in your UMQuest, I'm going to be talking also on 2 weekends from now on the 7 principles. I figured out, listening to you, what I wanted to say, and that song affected my thinking too. And I'm somehow presenting the metaphor that each principle is a bucket and we put into it what the belief in that principle makes me do. But the point is, right now, because of what's happening in the world around me, I've realized the bucket is a way bigger bucket than I thought. And there's much more involved in actually being accepting of any principle as being a really big thing. These aren't just little human thoughts. These are the little human thoughts that are steps to a hugeness, because we've been, I think I'm yelling, I'm sorry.
You're not, you're coming through fine.
We've been witness as a country, because of television, to watching the police kill a man, to seeing a policeman shoot somebody, of seeing a group of people be aroused and sent up into the house of our government, leaving us realizing that our imagination was not big enough. We couldn't imagine that, in spite of the fact that Trump's been acting that way from the beginning. And so I'm going to be considering, Glennis, we are going to be considering how to make our imaginations big enough to actually know where these beliefs are going to lead us. I've got just great notes that I'm trying to hold on to and realize it, but I realized that the gift of the riot was that it was done on television. You don't have to explain it to me. I was there. I watched it. I saw their faces. I know that that man with his feet up on her desk was a corner office guy who has lost his job. His company kicked him out. I mean, this was no small thing that happened. People's lives are changing day by day. As I saw you on television, you had our logo on your shirt. You are fired. So I'm saying, what's happening here for us is huge. And I don't think we have any idea how big the buckets are that these 7 principles offer us. And I'm really excited.
And I'll comment briefly on that metaphor of, principles as a container to hold, our own values, which may be unique within that container. Years ago, my wife, Suzanne, who's been very political for a long time, she's a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. And part of that faith was actualized in her activism. And she did a workshop once with a group of other activists who came from other religious traditions. And they were tasked with creating with art materials a symbol of their faith. And she ended up decorating an empty paper bag. And she said at the time she felt like, mine's empty. There's nothing in here of substance. And then over the years has realized, as you said, it's a container. And so we have this container given to us, if you will, a chalice. And what contents it has is ours to determine individually and collectively in gathered community. So it's a powerful metaphor to work from. I may go to church here that Sunday too, and not in Eugene.
So Sharon's next, but Connie, I just wanted to see, did I see your hand up before you dropped off? No, okay, cool. Okay, so go ahead, Sharon.
Well, what I intended to say has been kind of blurred by my emotions. This week has really been a trial for me. I've survived quite well, but the song, when I first started to hear it, I thought, oh my gosh, a run-on song. I don't know if I'm ready for this run-on song, but I did listen all the way through, even before you did play it, Michael.
Yeah.
And I realized it was such a summary of our year. And I had totally forgotten about my poor hands. I have looked everywhere to try to salvage my hands. And it's come up again in the last 2 weeks. What do I do so my hands stop itching? And when she mentioned that in the song, it was like, yeah, I've come a long way. But we all have. And we're all survivors, thank goodness. And I'm grateful for the principles to help us. And particularly for all of you. I make it day by day, mostly by myself. And I think, oh, I don't think I want to go to church today. And then I do, and I'm so glad to see all of your faces. So thank you for showing up. Even from 2,000 miles away.
Yeah. Well, on a personal note, Sharon, right back at you. You know, Sharon has been joining us for walks and awesome conversation over the past couple of weeks, and it's come to be a high point for me. So, you know, I greatly appreciate you.
Oh, thanks.
Um,
Walk is with Kim and Michael and
yeah.
myself.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Dennis. Sorry.
No, I just would add that, I did include a paragraph in that very full sermon about one of my joys is to be gather in community, virtually or alone with people who share some of that same sense of a commitment to a better future and a faith tradition that says we are called to do something and believes that what we do matters. And so, yeah, that's an articulation of what I was trying to come up with in that piece in the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to say, the preacher gets to say, "Amen, sister."
And brother.
That's we're gonna start a drinking game with you, Dennis. That every time you say that. No, I love it when you say that. Okay, who's next? Oh, Connie.
Oh, you said Kim on it too.
Oh yeah. We'll get there. Kim, just let me know when you're ready. All right. I've asked you to unmute, Connie. There you go.
There, am I unmuted?
You are loud and clear.
Okay, I would like to say something about the opening of the service. The opening our hands to what comes to us, and then bringing that into our heart. And for me, that was like, don't just dismiss it, feel it, like let it be, and then letting it go. I mean, I love that, and I'm going to use that in my yoga practice now. Thank you, Dennis.
I'll let you know it's worth taking some time to read Mary Oliver's on Blackwater Pond, which part of it is the inspiration that, was in my head when I first came to the notion of crafting that little meditation piece.
Yeah. And I don't know, they went by a little bit too fast, which I plan on changing in the next opening slideshow. But did any of you see the children's versions of the 7 principles? Yeah.
Yes, perfect. They were so perfect.
I had no idea that those existed until I started to look for images.
It's in the RE curriculum.
Yeah. But I was tickled to see those. I thought they were fantastic. All right, let's do this, Kim. Go for it.
Okay, well, apparently this is what I got out of your sermon. When I think of your sermons as spiritual, I don't get anything. But when I start thinking politics and that kind of stuff, I get a lot. So here's number one thing. It's a quote from somebody. It says, "We are lifting up citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed, and we are delivering a future of fairness, justice, and dignity. We are defending our values, our principles, and our way of life." So that's I got this from something online. I have it if you want to get it. But there's something that's I thought, wow, that's pretty incredible what that person wrote. So I just want to see what people think. I have 2 other things to say too, but I was just wondering what people think about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dennis, you're the speaker this week, so.
Well, I mean, I certainly agree with that piece of, we are looking to lift up our values. And something about your comment about content. The hope is when we craft worship, it's an experience in the whole, approximately an hour that opens up who we are as, spiritual beings in this community, whether it's the meditation or the music or the sermon. I remember my mentor and minister, the Reverend Carolyn Colbert, she said, "Oh yeah, the sermon, that part that some people think is the most important part of the service. And I'm at that basis too. It's only part of it. It's a verbal articulation. And sometimes what touches us most deeply is that what happens outside of those words in music and in shared silence. So that comes to mind. And then in terms of what you were talking about, it's certainly a sense of, I believe as a faith tradition, we're called to put our values into action. In the Christian tradition, there's some language from the book of John about what we do matters. And that's true in other liberal traditions as well.
Yeah, well, this quote is from Donald Trump, just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, well, Donald Trump and or his writers. And, but it's like, again, how do we put our words into our actions? And I think what we do speaks most loudly.
Okay, the second thing I have was the article is called Very Real Racism Within Black Community. Because you were saying stuff about how the Blacks need more help and that kind of stuff. So I wrote a bunch of stuff down, but the main thing I was looking at was that you guys talk about white privilege or something like that. And this lady was saying that she can't imagine any white person waking up and thinking, God, I'm white and privileged, so this world is gonna has a whole lot of stuff waiting for me to conquer. White folks struggle too. There are millions of poor white folks that in this community without opportunities, just like regions of poor Black people. The reality for all, both Black and white, is that poor is poor, and being poor isn't easy as skin is white.
Right.
And I totally agree with that. I don't think there's any such thing as a white privilege versus Black racism. I mean, I know there's I know there's racism out there, don't get me wrong, but I think, everybody, no matter what color of your skin is, has issues and has troubles. They could be, and we're all poor, we're all sacrificing, we're all doing all this stuff, and it doesn't matter the color of one's skin. That's my second point.
Well, I know that, this is a much longer, more involved discussion. Our larger association has been, talking a lot about a construct of white supremacy and how there's been teach-ins from the UUA, lots of writing, lots of discussions to, really look more deeply into that question. I mean, the quote from Václav Havel that I lifted up talked about Eurocentric. And I think that's a better description than white supremacy culture. But there is a long history of very distinct racial divides that made it easier for Irish immigrants, or like my forebears, German immigrants, to access the realities of opportunities in this country. For example, I was born in a neighborhood. My parents had just built a house in a neighborhood in Salem, Oregon, where there was a codicil to the deed that said white people could not buy property in that neighborhood. That house that my parents bought and built in 1950 was the beginning of building a family estate. And when my mother died, I inherited some money, which I passed on mostly to my kids. Black families didn't have that opportunity. So I think there are differences, but I also think it's important when we talk about white privilege or Black Lives Matter, we're not saying other lives don't matter. We're saying that it has been harder, and there's lots of good evidence and lots of good examples of where it has been harder for people of color. Starting with the fact that most people of color forebears didn't choose to come to this continent. And going back to that point, or the other people of color in terms of indigenous populations didn't choose to leave their land. The name Umpqua was the tribal name first. So I just think it's being aware more fully is the first step. And I'm acknowledging some possibilities that maybe it's a little less difficult when we don't all also carry the burden of people's attitudes shaped about us by simply them looking at us or hearing our name or reading our name on a job application that seems to have an impact on who gets a job and who doesn't. So, I think, like I said, it's a much fuller discussion and an ongoing discussion. And for me, understanding that and unpacking what all that means is work I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life as a cisgender, heterosexual, white male who's been in leadership roles. As a minister or even in childcare, I was the director and a teacher. And so I've got a lot of work of my own to deconstruct. So I'm not going to give you any free easy answers. Like I said at the beginning of this sermon, if you thought you were going to get an answer from a minister who was going to tell you absolute truths, you were in the wrong community and listening to the wrong minister. I'm just making some suggestions that maybe we have some work to do and to look more deeply in ourselves and how we're part of a larger culture. Little preachy, but that's who I am.
Not at all, actually. If anything, to me, this proves that we can have these kinds of discussions and they can be productive, in clarifying the way that we all feel about certain issues. I will say that for upcoming AEO discussions, I'll be leading discussions about how we tackle these issues. And where maybe the validity or lack of validity in some of these arguments are. And so for anybody in the chat who's interested in that kind of a discussion, it would be interesting to have you join. Kim, I know you had another thing to say, but I wonder if it's okay with you if we could circle back to that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. And because Laleen wanted to jump in.
I can't miss the AEO opportunity. I really, really would encourage you to check in with Michael. His AEO's coming up next week, right?
I think so.
At 2:00,
Mhm.
and then it will meet on an ongoing basis because we can't use every single Wednesday.
Yeah.
Michael's going to be doing a very special kind of topic chat, and I don't want to get into that, but what I did want to add is that along with Michael's ongoing discussion, we'll go a lot of places, there will be also some very specifics. And Kim, I wanted just to share one of them with you. One of those is going to be, what is white privilege? Does it exist? And how, coming from a lot of different directions, could we really look at what we mean, first of all, by the term privilege, and then why do we just say white privilege? So I hope you'll join us, and the schedule is evolving. January is out, February will be coming to you in the next UmQuest. So stay connected to the UmQuest, stay connected to Facebook, and you'll see what's coming up. And bless you, Michael, for the ongoing.
Oh no, my pleasure. I love discussions. So well, Dennis, like I said, this is your Sunday, so feel free to dive in at any point. I know you haven't been directly referenced in the last couple statements, but just wanted to remind you. Sharon had something.
I want to offer something I heard this week in an interview with Resmaa Menakem, who is a Black philosopher, trauma specialist. And he says he doesn't like the terminology white privilege. And so I offer what he stated as white advantage.
Yeah.
So that's something for you all to chew on until we get to Michael's discussions.
Man, chewing a lot. Yeah. Okay, well, nobody else is. Kim, do you want to just knock out that third point real quick? Oh, and then okay, and then Joanne. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Okay, well, the third one is the title of the thing I was reading was Systematic Racism in Black Communities. And I was kind of reading through it, and it's kind of funny that it came to some Bible verses on how, let me read it. As the Bible makes it crystal clear that there is only one race. And here's the quote, here's the Bible verse. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all faces of the earth. And that's in Acts 17:26. So as far as God's concerned, we are one race, and there's in anything. So that's my last point.
I hear that one being put around a lot.
Yeah, well, and Kim, there is a sense that biologically that's true as well. And that, you know, most literature about racial disparity talks about race as a social construct. And that race only has meaning when people give it meaning. And unfortunately, people have all too often given it some very negative connotations, which ends up with differences of people's constructing senses sometimes of racial hierarchies. And whether that's a construct that disadvantages, you know, Black people and advantages whites, or it's a construct that disadvantaged indigenous peoples who were labeled as savages. You know, the Umpqua, there's the one example lifted up. It's something we construct. So I think you're exactly right. I am proud to be part of a human family that includes people across races. And when I ponder, you know, additional grandchildren in my life, my daughter has made very clear that if she has a second child, it won't be a biological child. And she's in South Africa. And so my next likely grandchild may very well be Black, you know, and will have advantages being born or being raised in a white family in South Africa that wouldn't exist for most Black people in South Africa.
Wait, so she plans to adopt? Is that what I understand?
Looking at adoption as a likely option.
Well, when you said like a non-biological, I was like, how
Yeah.
does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's like not her biological.
Gotcha.
Or her and her partner's biological child.
Well, one thing that, if I can add, one thing that's absolutely fascinating is the way that the word race has been used throughout history. And there's a book, I can't remember it, I think it was early 20th century, by a French author called The Psychology of Peoples. Where the author goes into great detail about the French race versus the English race, you know, whereas like in modern American society, we would just call these people white, you know. So let me give a trigger warning. If anybody goes out to read that book, you will find it to be the most vicious and derogatory racist literature you will ever read. So just be aware of that. So okay. Well, thank you, Kim. I want to say thank you for, you know, I always feel like a voice of dissension is often the most valuable voice because it pushes us forward. So, yeah.
Well, and Kim, I'd like to add to that too and say thank you, because you'll also note, you know, in the sermon I talked about, we as a faith are a faith that questions. We want to ask the questions. We want to discuss. I mean, in the joke I shared, you know, heaven for Unitarian Universalists is going to a discussion group for all eternity. So it's part of who we are and who we choose to be. And when we narrow that, it it disadvantages all of us.
Personally, my favorite UU joke is the how many UUs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Right. Look it up. You won't be disappointed. Joanne wanted to go, and I think, and then Lillian, did I see your hand up?
Brian and also
Yeah.
Jason.
How
Oh,
many
okay.
does it take,
Cool.
Michael?
Go ahead, Joanne.
Tell us how quickly, how long does it take for 3 people to do the light bulb?
Oh my gosh, I can't
It's
remember.
very long.
Very
There's-
long. Yeah.
It
It's-
involves committees.
Yeah, it involves committees and dances and candles and yeah, it's
I will look it up then.
yeah.
I just wanted to today thank Michael and Martha. Every week they put through for us such an exceptional
Oh.
program that
Oh.
I appreciate that.
Thank
I
you.
very much liked your sermon today. And it brought up questions for me, but it helped answer some questions for me too. So anyway, I keep thinking to myself with all this going on, the Republicans, the Democrats, what's the truth? What is the truth here? And I was reading in our local newspaper the pros and cons of the Democrats and the Republicans today. And I was glad to have the opportunity to hear both sides. Some of it I liked, some of it I didn't like. But as I continued to read and saw this divide, I thought about myself. And even thinking about this divide, old tapes come back to people. And I thought, the nuns, I would never be able to question. I was taught, and I still retain some of those thinkings. We've told you what to do it, and don't question, because we are always right. So anyway, with that, I thought a little bit more. And I thought, as I have been learning from people here, but mainly JC and Laline, follow my heart. And when I follow my heart, of course, I know the answer. And the answer is that each person I meet or don't meet, but think about or hear, is important in this world to me. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Joanne. Oh, okay. Connie, is that okay, Lillian, if we go to Connie first?
I kind of follow what Joanne was going to say. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
brief.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Joanne, for the lead in. We were talking about UUs being always into discussion and all of that. And I just wanted to, remind ourselves that we truly are a faith of great compassion. And, as Dennis so clearly illustrated with the principles discussion, that yes, we approach things with a very questioning mind, but as other ministers bring to us also with Dennis, is that heart-mind congruence. And Unitarians, in my way of viewing it as a newer one, do a really fine job of taking all that we can discuss and sort that through with our hearts and arrive at a place of truth and great compassion.
Well, and I think that's the piece too, that's summarized by the Dalai Lama when he said, compassion is my religion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Connie.
Yeah. Go for it, Connie.
Okay. What, I don't know, I tried to find my notes and I couldn't find it. Something in Dennis's talk today made me think of Native American teachings. And I got to thinking about, and this could be through AEO or whatever, or even sermons where we explore how those teachings fit in with our principles, or how our principles fit in with those teachings. I was thinking of yoga, and the branches of yoga, and there's so much that we infer about, like yoga or Native American spirit or whatever, that it might be a good time, since we're exploring things about ourselves, to take a look at some I don't want to say the word religions, but teachings,
Mhm.
and see how much we've either embraced some of those teachings or kind of put those aside. Those don't fit into our 7 principles. Do you see what I'm kind of saying? What I'm going to be writing about for the UMQuest has to do with self-righteousness. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out.
Connie, if I can, so often when we think of the 7 principles, we forget about the 7 sources.
Mhm.
And it is.
That's another amen moment.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. Oh, there you go.
Wait a
Take
minute.
it on, Dennis, take it on.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. Dennis, did you want to respond to anything?
No, I think that's the key point. If
Yeah.
you look at the sources we look to,
Yeah.
you know, and a free and responsible search for truth and meaning referenced in the principles.
Yeah.
I would just comment, when we look at other traditions, we need to figure out how do we do that responsibly as well, and not simply, you know, pick and choose and claim it as ours for the day, you know, which is a risk when we look at traditions that have been marginalized, like indigenous traditions. And it's important to look at its traditions, plural. You know, there were 350 tribal communities on this continent before Europeans came, and they were very different community to community. So, but yeah, there's lots of value there. And some of the contemporary writings, one of the most profound religious experiences of my life was at Drum Circle when I was invited to go to Standing Rock, and just participating in that ritual as a, you know, white man on the edges of that vibrational energy was profound. So yeah, it's one of the many sources we look at.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of, it's one of the reasons why I love the Great Books series, you know, and the Great Wisdom series that really grows out of that, is that there's a concerted effort by scholars to put together some of the most influential and important thoughts from thinkers all over the world. And you will never waste time, right, by searching through those kinds of sources. So I think that's a great idea, Connie. JC, did you? Yeah, you did have something to say. Okay.
The song we sang first, where the core, it all boils down to that I might know your mind. That we need to change. The Unitarian is not just a person with a mind. There is a person with a heart, with feelings, with hope, with imagination, and those things are not limited to our mind. And I find that song misses the wholeness of what it takes to live the principles. You can't do it from mind. You have to find the way that heart, like in the Going Along song, she brought anger into her mind to blow it away so that it was more open. That's a marvelous statement. And the grief relief, that those things that are actually aspects that you deal with our feelings first to make them real. When we are witness to the unjustness that happens, we are not using our mind. That's what it evolves to. We are first using our, when we watched that group of people take over the Capitol, that wasn't a head trip. that went deep, deep, deep in me. And I had to figure out where it went to, because all sorts of things were wrong, but the anger and the grinding the door shut on that one man who eventually died, and this stuff, that's not mind, people. And so when we're talking about how do we act out of our all of our 7 principles, we are whole selves, and our mind is influenced by how we feel and vice versa. And it's been an incredibly powerful week, because it took us places we weren't ready to go. Although it's no surprise, if we've been paying attention, it was inevitable. But it went beyond where we were ready to think about. And I think all of our principles are just ready and waiting to take us beyond what we can imagine.
And even beyond the principles. I mean, just, and at some future time, I'll craft a sermon probably about a proposed 8th principle that's out there. And I think that, you're exactly right. Some of our hymns, particularly those that come from the Unitarian side of our family,
Right.
was a very heady faith tradition. There's a famous sermon. Okay, the author will come to me in a minute, probably before I'm talking. William Ellery Channing, called "Likeness of God." It was a staunch Unitarian approach that we can refine our minds to be more godlike, while the Universalists were preaching sermons about love. And so the Unitarian tradition and the Universalist traditions, are the merger of the two, I think, invited us all to become what I call more both-andian, to listen to our heads and our hearts. And how do we bring those together into action is the calling of our faith.
Okay. Yeah, I see you, Lillian. Anne wanted to go, and so I'll circle back to you if nobody else.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. I sat up straight when JC, who I'm normally in 110% agreement with, said that she wasn't inspired, or whatever word she said about the song. And I took that song completely different, to the point I had to kind of rewrite it here. But I'll bring you hope. It's like when we dance, that'll bring me hope. When we can sing together, that'll bring me hope that maybe we can talk. When we can, light a flame together, that'll bring me hope. That'll bring me the roses. I sat with a man who was dying, who was a friend of a friend, and somehow we just ended up on a couch holding hands for 2 or 3 hours, never a word said. There's times that words don't need to be said, but the fact that I might walk with you by a lake, I might sit with you wherever, and it comes back to the heart and the mind. It's both. And the whole idea of movement in where do we go from here was, one breath from now, I'm no longer where I was. One step from here, I'm no longer where I was. So we can go anywhere. And I just, that's what hit me when you said that, JC.
Well, please understand that I have never acted out when we have sung that song in church. I behave myself and I sing it just the way it's meant to be.
Yeah, no, but today when I heard it earlier today, I'm going, yeah.
And and you just paraphrased the title of the other hymn that we entered, which was One More Step.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
That was what I thought with the very opening. I read your sermon last night. I listened to part of it this morning and then more of it later this morning. But that was my very first reaction. And where do we go from here? Well, like I just said, take a breath and we're no longer in the same time we were. Take a step. It doesn't matter. Move somewhere else and take your next breath. Or don't do anything and the whole world just changed in the 2 seconds I was talking. Right?
Yeah. And
So
for the record, and everything that you said about the song was exactly what I was thinking. But
yeah.
so I hear you.
Yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so just to keep in mind, Martha wanted to go next, and then how about Laleen?
Okay. All right, me? All right.
Yep.
I want to go back to what was talked about last week in vibrations and how important those are. Vibrations of the heart, vibrations of the mind, and how man over time has taken the indigenous, or whatever you want to call it, practice of the earth-centered traditions and the very meaningful heart. They weren't so much here as they were here and here. And how you watch services with wonderful choirs, and especially services from the Black gospel tradition. It's here. These people are feeling it here. I just feel music. I mean, I love my mind and I love to be challenged, but I personally am much affected by music, the words, the movement, just all of those things that involve the whole body. And I think we need to look more towards that inclusiveness in many of our sermons. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. I got a drink from yes. All right. This is not a competition, but I really feel that and there's this in the current UU world that thing by Rideout, the fellow from Ann Arbor, he goes right into that. How important that is to include many groups of people that don't react only to up here. They need to react from here. That's my 3 cents.
And if you haven't checked out his music, I know we talked about him last week. Please make sure you do.
Yeah, we've used at least one recording of some of his stuff.
Yeah, it was Dennis that introduced me to his music. So yeah.
And I met him at a regional assembly and got to sing in a choir with him. And
wow.
Even more profound when you get to sing with him in the room.
Yeah.
And we'll get to do that down the road. We'll actually get to sing together in the room.
Yes.
You promise.
We keep hoping. Yeah.
Someday.
Great. Laleen, go ahead.
Just another quickie from several years ago when we did workshops on the principles, and I was reminded as I pulled one of those out for JC earlier today and from today's conversation that it was my first time really through the principles, believe it or not, 4 or 5 years ago. And what I learned about myself and what I tried to convey in that whole series was that one cannot live through their mind, that we must lead with our heart. And my journey through becoming a Unitarian has tried to evolve through that kind of thinking, because I can be incredibly cognitive, as you all know. And so I'm continually working with myself to do that, which is my cognitive ease with a little more heart, and to find the heart to carry it, I guess.
And the moderator says, "I'm amen." Yeah. Dennis, I hope you never stop saying that. I'm sorry.
You know, you gave me another nonverbal version to say.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
It's
Yeah.
only a glass of water, right?
Ah, drat.
Yeah. Oh, never mind.
Ah,
wait,
wait a
wait.
minute. John,
Ah,
what
John,
did you say?
yeah,
Hold that
John,
up.
you gotta bring it back up. Let's see.
Oh,
ah,
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
like that.
Not a bad
There,
idea.
you know, on a related one, you know, I suggest people might want to take a look at UUA Common Read, which is a UUA resource of book study that provides some really good study questions as well. You know, I've been involved in those back in the day when I was just a lay member and as a minister facilitating those. And I just looked at the 1920 was an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, certainly related to part of what we've talked about tonight. So Common Read's a really good resource for some book group discussions. And I think remembering as a largely lay-led congregation that those resources are available to use. The UUA's got some good stuff, some good work around those questions about white privilege and how to, you know, understand that and perhaps deconstruct even what it means. I got to admit too, I'll just add before, you know, we wrap up, is that white advantage phrase is one that certainly works better for me.
Interesting. Well, does anybody want a last word? I see you, JC. I just, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we got Connie and JC, so maybe just be concise. Go ahead.
yes, yeah, very. Go, Connie. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Okay, not a problem. Connie, I've asked you to unmute. Oh, you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, mine is just a question that in these discussions, like the write-out person that was referred to, sometimes in these discussions, someone is referred to, but later on, I want to know more about that. And I don't even know, this is a musician and how he spells his name. If we had a little more information sometimes on who we're referencing.
Connie, this is Glenn Rideout, and it's spelled just the way it sounds, Rideout. He's a phenomenal musician.
Okay.
Yeah.
The article is in this magazine.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I try to supplement the discussion with links in the chat. So if you have access to the chat, sometimes I'll put links in there. So just something to be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Doesn't the chat go away after the Zoom is over?
It does. You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
So email will probably be better.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to bog people down with emails, but yeah. JC, did you? Oh, wait, Glenn.
Yeah, I did. And
Wait.
it is somehow in the last time, weeks, months, things that were never spoken about are now part of our common speaking. Like when the statement was made. If those people rushing that building had been Black, you know this would be going differently. Dead silence. Yes, the entire country knew that was true.
But that's not true. If you look at the riots that have been happening all over the country, people the police have been very wary of using force against them. So I don't agree with that statement.
I do.
What? Just
Casey's right.
That we are speaking about things makes a difference.
Look at the Chop Chaz, group in Seattle, or the storming of the judicial building in Portland. The police have been very restrained all year.
I don't think that was my point, Michael.
Your point was that if they were Black, the police would have taken more aggressive action.
No, my point is that can now be said. It wouldn't have been said 3 years ago.
That's interesting. Well,
but now it can be considered as, yes, we know what you're saying.
Maybe
you'll have to join the AEO, I guess.
Maybe it's a lifting up of questions
Mhm.
and some things that have risen this last year. Questions are being asked about the racial reality and the racial history of America that weren't asked for a long time.
Well, see, this
Transfer of wealth.
this is the thing, my friends, is that we had a whole hour, and then in the last 5 minutes, everybody wants to jump in. You know,
I got a solution to that
I-
one, Michael.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about what they want to talk about.
that's right.
Join AEO. If you
Join
want these
AEO.
discussions to happen, step up and say, hey, I would lead one, or what about this idea? Can you help me
Right.
with that? Otherwise, AEO is going to tank
Thank
and
you.
no longer exist.
Yes, best
The
advertisement ever.
initials stand for, what is the, tell me, AEO initials?
Oh, adult enrichment opportunity. Yeah. So, guys, I know we could continue this conversation, but we are up against the hour. And Dennis, you have been so generous with your time, so we always appreciate it. You wanna give us a closing benediction, or
Keep on going on.
wise
That's
words?
it.
Well, thank you much, and we will see you all, or hopefully most of you, next week. Have a beautiful week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael.